fueling scientific research and discovery in respect, as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific, technological elite.
We've signed a climate convention on the importance of economic instruments and free markets. Were included in this mammoth Agenda 21 document and the Rio Declaration. Let me be clear on one fundamental point. The United States fully intends to be the world's preeminent leader in protecting the global environment.
Coming up, Technocracy News. And welcome to Technocracy News. Patrick Wood here, Editor-in-Chief. And today we're going to look at a couple of stories, and I'm going to give you a couple of predictions for 2020. This is the beginning of the decade, and it's the beginning of a new year. And before it gets away from us, I do want to make a few predictions that I've been thinking about. Let's just call them forecasts, perhaps. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't make predictions per se. Not that way anyway, and I don't have an 8-ball that gives you a yes or no answer or anything like that. But I have been thinking about where technocracy is headed and where we're headed in the year 2020. First, however, I've got 3 stories I want to put out before you that I consider to be important from this last week. Number 1 has to do with Andrew Yang, the presidential candidate. I'm sure everybody is at least familiar with him. And truly, he doesn't have a chance in a million to win the presidential election in 2020. But he's still in the race as of now, and he is a techno-populist. This is something that I've been tracking on Technocracy News and Trends for some time. The movement, the techno-populism movement that exists in Europe as well as in the United States. And in some ways, even President Trump could probably be close to being a techno-populist, but Andrew Yang fits the bill to the T. And for that reason, I just want to showcase him a little bit. I wrote at the top of this article, no 2020 presidential candidate represents pure technocrat plus pure populist platform better than Andrew Yang. He is notably different than the extreme socialist or leftist candidates and should be recognized as a techno-populist. And this indeed is an interesting article from Quillette. Very insightful, and the writer also seems to understand technocracy. So the article states, Andrew Yang is a peculiar candidate for the presidency. Not only has he no previous political experience, but he has also placed great emphasis on issues that have been on the fringes of mainstream media, political discourse, usually examined by academics or YouTube personalities. It is a credit to him that topics like automation, the meaning and value of work, the concentration of elite talent into narrow career paths, and of course, UBI, that's Universal Basic Income, have had a chance to be touched on during this campaign cycle. Nonetheless, the most provocative aspect of the Yang campaign and of the man himself is the unusual tension between a technocratic emphasis on expertise and efficiency and the populist rhetoric he uses to denounce remote elite enclaves and to call for a revolution that, in the words of Bismarck, we undertake rather than undergo. Yang views himself, or at least projects himself as, the people's technocrat, an expert that the average Joe can trust. One of the reasons I really want to showcase Andrew Yang, by the way, is that young millennials and professionals really like Andrew Yang. They're resonating with him. And as I said, he has no chance really at getting the nomination for president on the Democrat ticket, but perhaps he'll form another party someday and call it the Techno-Populist ticket or something. The article continues, technocracy is government by experts. The term is Greek in origin, fusing techne, describing art or skill, and kratos, meaning power or rule. But the literal meaning of this word is not its salient contemporary sense. Modern technocracy, and by extension technocrats, usually endorse government by a specific kind of expert, using a particular sort of method. The technocrat is usually, though not always, versed to some degree in STEM, that is, science, technology, engineering, and math, and social science domains, and tends to want governments to draw from scientific methods and findings, argue from data and cutting-edge studies, and value efficiency and systematic rigor. Social problems to the technocrat are thought to come more from incompetence, waste, or negligence than from ideology or malice. As Zbigniew Brzezinski eloquently put it in Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, quote, social problems are seen less as the consequence of deliberate evil and more as the unintended byproducts of both complexity and ignorance. Solutions are not sought in emotional simplifications, but in the use of man's accumulated social and scientific knowledge, close quote. Well, there's the tip of the hat to Zbigniew Brzezinski, who indeed was one of the first modern technocrats to propose technocracy to China, to co-found the Trilateral Commission, which basically hijacked the entire technocratic concept from those who developed it in the 1930s. The article continues to summarize: the technocrat is someone who assumes that, number one, government and policy would be better off if they were presided over and or dictated by technical experts. Number two, the problems of politics are primarily problems of efficiency and administrative dysfunction. Number three, the application of the results and methods of the sciences and or other technical fields is the best way to solve our political problems. And lastly, number four, there should be a resource of unassailable facts that politicians use as the basis of argument, which lies outside of the realm of opinion. One of the most striking aspects of Yang's latest book, The War on Normal People, is just how many tech leaders, startup gurus, entrepreneurs, and hedge fund managers this man is in contact with. And indeed, he is connected to big tech in a big way. Countless pages offer anecdotes of Yang jetting to dinners with his Silicon Valley leader in San Francisco or that technical expert in the Northeast. Yang, by the very company he keeps, signals that he is a member of this technocratic class. More substantially, the thesis of Yang's book is both diagnostic and prescriptive. He argues that many of the current jobs that serve as a backbone of our economy will either be rendered obsolete by accelerating automation or will be done by a small group of technical experts, leaving many jobless and languishing in economic despair. According to Yang, the available data show this process is already well underway and will continue to worsen in the coming years. Yang calls this development the Great Displacement, and the unavoidable reality of automation, he says, will force the government to implement new economic and social policies in response. Universal basic income, what Yang calls the, quote, freedom dividend of $1,000 a month, is Yang's preferred means of dealing with this looming crisis. Whether or not one agrees with this view, it is clearly suggestive of Yang's technocratic sensibilities. He supports his claims and ideas with data from the U.S. Bureau that show low labor force participation, the recent elimination of manufacturing jobs, and an increasing discrepancy between productivity and compensation. His claim that elite talent is clustering into a few geographic regions and disciplines rests on data from the career offices at those very elite institutions. For Yang, data are the primary resource with which he frames his picture of what is going wrong in our nation. A reliance on data to understand problems and formulate policy responses is characteristic of the technocrat. Yang wants to give every adult in the United States $1,000 a month, adjusted for inflation, which will cost about $1.3 trillion by Yang's own estimate. He stresses that this plan will be more efficient than the current system of government assistance programs because, number one program will be able to accomplish the work of 126. That's efficient, isn't it? Number two, direct monetary compensation has been shown, in some studies at least, to have more positive outcomes than mediated forms of charity or relief. And lastly, the cost of the program can be offset by so-called VAT tax, as value-added tax, which will increase the cost of some consumer goods, and UBI will result in job growth. Yang wants to show that his signature program will clean up administrative waste, increase efficiency, and that it is vouched for by experts. In terms of Yang's rhetoric, the following passage in particular encapsulates his technocratic sensibilities. And this is a quote from his book. "We have an indebted state rife with infighting, dysfunction, and outdated ideas and bureaucracies from bygone eras, along with a populace that cannot agree on the basic facts like vote totals or climate change. Our politicians offer half-hearted solutions that will at best nibble at the edges of the problem. The budget for research and development in the Department of Labor is only $4 million. We have a 1960s-era government that has few solutions to the problems of 2018. That's when he wrote his book, of course. This must change if our way of life is to continue. We need a revitalized, dynamic government to rise to the challenge posed by the largest economic transformation in the history of mankind. The above may sound like science fiction to you, but you're reading this with a supercomputer in your pocket or reading it on the supercomputer itself, and Donald Trump was elected president. Yang focuses on the outdated and inefficient state of our modern government and the technocratic solution of cutting-edge methods to modern problems. And he is vexed by the inability of people to agree on basic facts, particularly scientific ones, that ought to carry far more weight than mere opinions. For this reason, technocrats like Yang tend to favor a quasi-evangelistic outreach to the public concerning scientific education. And finally, there is the concluding reference to the benefits of technology and to its inevitable future advances. Technocracy, being more of a method of governing than a value system or worldview, it is often used by a dominant ideology to make its ideological agenda more efficient. So in China, which has until recently been governed as a technocracy, made up almost exclusively of engineers, the technocrats support communism. But in America, it is often used to make neoliberal policy more effective. This being the case, the elites are never really afraid of a technocrat. They understand that the method can be used to serve almost any master. Technocracy has also the benefit, at least in the States, of flattering the ego of the middle classes. Supporting a technocrat can signal seriousness and intelligence on the part of the informed voter who cares about serious policy issues and scientific data. Thus, technocracy in itself is never really a challenge to the status quo. But this description does not by itself fully describe Yang or his campaign. And the article goes on to explain how Yang is appealing to the populist movement, the average Joe out there in America who is caught between the opposite forces of Democrat versus Republican debates, and he pitches himself to the average Joe, perhaps even the blue-collar worker, who is caught in the crosshairs of the fight going on between liberals and conservatives and Democrats and Republicans and policy wonks who trot out endless programs for more greed and corruption. Yang doesn't have a chance at the presidency in 2020, but he's floating issues that I can guarantee you are going to pick up steam in coming years. You may see him again on the ballot in 2024. The next story is a small one, but it's really important too. Another story has surfaced on the birth rate in America. For 30 years now, the birth rate has been going down. And this article states that the U.S. birth rate continues dropping in 42 states. This is serious business because as population declines, so does everything else. So does all of the economic activity. And the balance between young people and old people gets all out of whack. So that there's too many older people while there's too few young people to support the whole economic system. I wrote at the top of this, any national agenda to increase American births would have to include nullifying the abortion lobby and the practice of abortion. In the meantime, the U.S. is below replacement rate, guaranteeing economic decline and ultimately deflation. The anti-human agenda of sustainable development, aka technocracy, has population reduction as one of its main objectives. UN experts believe that the Earth can only support around 1 billion humans. Where would the other 6.5 billion humans go? Well, they don't say, but that's their goal, is to suppress the population until it eventually falls and people die off naturally. Who knows? But this has been a United Nations goal for a long time. This article states 42 states in the nation and Washington, D.C. continue to see their birth rates decline with no plans among lawmakers to financially incentivize Americans to have more children. In other words, lawmakers are asleep at the switch, as usual. The latest United States Census Bureau data reveals that births in 42 states, as well as Washington, D.C., have kept dropping between 2018 and 2019. Only 8 states saw their birth rates increase between 2018 and 2019. Those states included Arizona and Colorado and Idaho and Nevada, Washington State. The Census Bureau noted in its findings, quote, with fewer births in recent years and the number of deaths increasing, natural increase, or births minus deaths, has declined steadily over the past decade. As Breitbart News has chronicled, the U.S. birth rate overall has dropped for the 4th consecutive year. In 2018, less than 3.8 million babies were born in the U.S., a drop of 2%, or almost 64,000 births since 2017. The total fertility rate, which stands at 1,729.5 births per 1,000 women, remains below replacement level. I'll interpret that for you. That means that our current birth rate cannot maintain the level of population. It's guaranteed to go down. And we're almost to the point of no return, which is seen historically when a birth rate slips below a certain level. The society cannot in any way recover its population. We're almost to that point right now. The article continues, since 1971, the birth rate has been below replacement level, according to the CDC. Birth rates across all major racial groups, non-Hispanic whites, Hispanics, non-Hispanic blacks, and non-Hispanic Asians, were again below replacement level for 2018. Despite a declining birth rate below replacement level, Republican and Democrat lawmakers have yet to lay out a national agenda to increase American births, fertility, and family rates. So, if nothing changes between now and, say, 2050, America as a nation is cooked. Our population will decline to the point that we simply won't be a nation anymore, and we won't be able to recover our population. That means eventually somebody else will take over our real estate and our territory. Maybe they can enjoy it and learn how to make babies and populate it correctly. The last story is unquestionably the most important story for you to understand today. I put a headline on this one, I am Geospatial, and I will track you forever. The story is about geospatial intelligence. It was put out by Geospatial World, an organization that chronicles what's going on in the geospatial technology slice of big tech. And I wrote at the top of this article, a key element to total surveillance is geospatial tracking, or GeoInt. That's geospatial intelligence, and monitoring of everything that moves. GeoInt was originally developed by the military for the military, but now it will power smart cities around the globe. The embedded videos are critical for you to watch and contemplate. Take them to all of your locally elected officials and show them why they should reject smart city makeover technology. And indeed, the 2 short videos that are embedded in this article are critical to watch. You just can't grasp what's going on here without watching these short videos. These are industry videos, by the way. The article states, as the world gets smarter and more connected, 5G and geospatial will together be powering cities of the future. I'll pause here to mention that, of course, we all know what 5G is. We've been writing a lot about that. We've also been writing a lot about smart city technology in general and the Internet of Things. We've presented a few articles in the past on geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt, but basically, as we'll see, GeoInt is the physical tracking of anything that moves. Let's say anything and everything that moves, because it's not enough just to know where the buildings are and where the parks are and the hospitals are. Those are all fixed locations. What smart city people want is to track every individual, everywhere they go, to know what they do, how they do it, when they do it, why they do it, and they want to report that back to a giant database in the sky called the cloud. And now they're stating, as I have stated many times, that 5G is going to make this possible. Real-time data collection for the first time in the history of the world, where all of these connected devices can track everything that moves and report it back instantly to an artificial intelligence program. The article continues, half of the world's population lives in cities, a proportion that is expected to increase to 68% by 2050. By the way, that is a nonsensical United Nations prediction. Absolutely false, but it's an assumption that the UN makes, and this assumption is repeated in this article. It continues, as our urban ecosystems grow ever larger, technology has the potential to dramatically improve the lives of those living in them. With the onset of digitalization and the fourth industrial revolution rapidly changing how we live, work, and interact, the biggest impact will be felt on our cities, as challenges like population pressure, deforestation, traffic congestion, deteriorating infrastructure, crime, and resource crunch impact cities the world over. Smart city innovations couldn't have come at a better time. Smart cities may save the world as much as $22 trillion by 2050, according to the Global Commission on Economy and Climate. Accurate geospatial information helps governments design better cities, improve public services, and engage with citizens. Urbanization of the future will be driven by geospatial data, and location would be a crucial component in digitalization of cities. And as cities get smarter, much of this location data has to be in real time. This is where geospatial and 5G converge. 5G and geospatial will work together by powering cities of the future. Quote, 5G will act as the connective tissue of tomorrow's digital economy, linking everything from smartphones to wireless sensors to industrial robots and self-driving cars, says Malcolm Johnson, Deputy Secretary General of International Telecommunications Union. Together, they are the critical link for a smart, interconnected world, bringing the next level of connectivity to industries and society that helps in shaping digital cities. I'll pause for a second and say, it'll shape them all right, and it's going to shape all of the people inside of them as well, because that's the point. Social engineering, behavioral modification. The article continues. Besides powering data at unbelievably fast rates, the coverage density of 5G is 100 times greater than current standards. 5G can connect up to 1 million devices per square kilometer. Its low latency and incredible speed and bandwidth will bring in the ubiquitous connectivity required by the smart city ecosystem. Time out again. The ecosystem does not exist yet because 5G is not everywhere yet. If 5G was never invented, all of these people would be sitting on the sidelines just dreaming about it. How can we get real-time data connectivity without laying fiber optic cables to everything in sight? So they need 5G. This is the whole point of bringing 5G to the city in the first place, is to create the Internet of Things, light it up like a Christmas tree. And when they do, geospatial intelligence is going to be applied to the city to track every single thing in the city, not only the state of inanimate things, but the location of everything that moves. And that includes people. It also includes cars and trucks and anything else that moves, even elevators and buildings. This article goes on to explain a little bit about 5G, and then there's a section towards the end, geospatial and 5G. It says geospatial insight is the key to planning for 5G network for unprecedented speed. It will expedite the process of site selection, design, and asset management, providing immersive overlay and point cloud view for decision-making, explains Frank Pauly, CEO of Cyclomedia. And let me point out, when he talks about a point cloud view for decision-making, yes, decisions are going to be made. They will be made without your knowledge or consent, based on data collected on you and around you. You'll never have a chance to see that data either, but decisions will be made, sometimes by people, sometimes by artificial intelligence programs. The article continues. 5G's higher frequencies, which is needed to carry huge amounts of data, have a very short range which can be impacted by the smallest of the obstructions. The signal is so sensitive that it can be blocked by the palm of your hand or even a raindrop. 5G will also require denser telecom network, most towers placed selectively and strategically. Therefore, accurate, authoritative geospatial data is fundamental here to plan network towers. So the planning of the smart city is already dependent on geospatial intelligence. I've heard estimates of placement of these towers everywhere from 1,000 meters up to 2,000 meters, but they're so small and so inexpensive, there's really no reason they can't go to the shorter distances. This will just mean more radiation for more people, and a lot of people are concerned about that, by the way. The article continues further. Because of the sensitivity of radio waves, it is necessary to have detailed maps, buildings with roof features, pipes, air conditioners, spires, sloping roofs, and even vegetation, which can also affect signal propagation. 5G wireless promotes higher capacity, more reliability, lower latency, and improved coverage, thus bringing greater accuracy in positioning services, that's geospatial location services, since telecom-based positioning technologies require telecom towers to be synchronized in nanoseconds relative to each other. 5G will also usher in new technology trends that will significantly impact the overall mobile network architecture, thus influencing their traditional positioning concepts as well. With location becoming fundamental to governance and all business processes, the value of location-based services for industries such as advertising and marketing, transportation, retail, will only increase, giving the 5G rollout and its subsequent expansion will enable more mobile interaction opportunities. Well, the handwriting is on the wall here. That's all I can say. Having read this to you, you need to go to the actual article and listen to the videos that are embedded in here. You'll get the idea so quickly with a few graphic images, you will never forget what you see. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This is compelling reason, by the way, for you to take this information down to your local elected officials and not just say no, but heck no. We don't want this in our city. Forget those light poles out there that have cameras and microphones in them to monitor conversations and track everybody going up and down a street. Forget using license plate readers to track everything on the street and every car that goes by. Forget facial recognition. We don't want to be tracked like lab rats in a laboratory where every move is noted, recorded, analyzed, and sliced and diced, and then used and weaponized against us to modify our behavior. We do not believe in behavior modification. We do not believe in social engineering. And we don't believe that you, Mr. City Official, or anybody else in the world, elected or not, have the right to tell me what to do and what not to do, period. I hope you can do that. And now here's a couple of predictions and trends for 2020. I've only got 9 so far. I might do some more as they pop into my head, but I give them to you in order. They're in no order of importance, by the way, either. It's just the way I happen to write them down. Number 1, the election process by the end of 2020 will be absolutely shredded, mostly between the Democrats and the Republicans. By November, by the time the election comes around, there will be so much contention, so many lies floating around, so much confusion floating around, that the American populace will lose confidence altogether in the electoral process. This is a very sad day for America. I dare say there will come a day when that we'll all go to the voting booth, but as soon as we step away from the desk where we mark down our choices, we'll be sticking our finger in a dish of purple dye, proving that we voted, able to show everybody else that we voted, not able to go to another polling center and say, I want to vote. Hey, you got a purple finger, Buster. You already voted. Number 2, Every political dirty trick ever imagined will be routine by September. This springboards off of number one. But we haven't seen the end of dirty political tricks. They're going to be commonplace and outrageous, I might add. Number 3, sex robots will be almost indistinguishable from real females. I've noticed in some of the literature on sex robots that they're not only making female sex robots, but they're also making male sex robots. And they're saying, well, there's equal demand between male and female. And I tell you, that is absolute nonsense. There's no doubt that a few women somewhere have bought a few male sex robots. But the vast, overwhelming majority of demand has come from men who seem to be as satisfied having sexual relations with a robot than they do with a real female. This doesn't bode well, by the way, for population decline, does it? It's going to speed it up in a heartbeat. Number 4, you've all seen what's gone on in Hong Kong with the mass protests there. I will forecast that China, before this is done, will make a pledge to satisfy them, to make them happy. China will make a pledge to move towards democracy so that they can salvage what's left of Hong Kong. They want Hong Kong desperately to stay in Chinese control. And of course, just saying that they're going to make a move towards democracy means nothing. It'll still be a technocratic state with everything controlled down to the jaywalking offenders that get their pictures posted up on the big screen right on the street for naming and shaming. Number 5, psilocybin, magic mushrooms. You've heard of it, at least. I hope you haven't tried it. It's a psychedelic, similar in effect to LSD. It's been around for a long time. Well, I happen to have a high school classmate who went on to university after he graduated from high school, became a top-of-the-line professor at Johns Hopkins University, and also became the world's leading expert in psilocybin. That is the drug that is extracted from magic mushrooms. And he has been positioning this drug using scientific trials to be used for depression and end-of-life issues where people who are depressed because they might die soon can take a little dose of this stuff, and wow, their whole attitude changes. It's almost like they're looking forward to checking out of planet Earth. Very dangerous experiment as far as I'm concerned. But I will make a prediction right now. The psilocybin is going to be cleared as a drug for depression and end-of-life patients by the end of 2020. If not then, very shortly thereafter. This almost certainly is going to happen. And the reason this is an important trend is because it will offer people who have difficulties in their life, maybe psychological difficulties, maybe some mental difficulties, but the kind of difficulties that probably should be just handled by a good counselor somewhere, and maybe a little bit of therapy. But heck no, now you got psilocybin. Take a pill, buddy. All your woes will be wished away. You'll just be amazed at how you feel after you're done with a few treatments of psilocybin. Well, you won't care about much then. So whatever your worries are today, they'll be gone. Number 6, the global debt bubble will implode, taking equity markets with it. This is a crisis just waiting to happen. Everything that was seen to be wrong in 2008 and 9 during the last financial meltdown is still in effect today. They've done nothing about it. They kicked the can down the road, and in many cases they've exacerbated the problem, and the whole debt structure in America is just teetering on collapse right now. The Fed is making desperate moves recently to inject liquidity, they call it, into the monetary system. They say liquidity, but what this means is there's such a demand for short-term overnight lending from the banks and from corporations too, that there's a shortage of that kind of money available. This was the same condition that brought Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns to their knees and indeed to the junkyard in 2009. So now the Fed is saying, we're not calling it QE, that is quantitative easing. We're just calling this a liquidity injection. Well, they're playing with fire, and they can't back out now. They can't get out of it. All the money that they're putting in right now is simply just expanding the value of stocks, and in some cases bonds, but it's just a matter of time before it runs out of steam. All bubbles, I'll repeat, all and every bubble in the history of the world has eventually popped and then imploded. America is no exception. And I hate to say, as much as I like the idea of Make America Great Again, this isn't a purposeful thing on anybody's part in the administration, I don't think. But as much as we like the idea of Make America Great Again, this is out of their hands. It has nothing to do with their policy. This is just the situation that we're in today. And if there's blame to be laid, we could lay it at the feet of the banksters, those vampire squid organizations that work in Wall Street, thereabouts, well, in other parts of the world as well. If there's any guilty party to point to, it probably would be them, because they're the ones that have loaned the money in a reckless way in the first place. Number 8, the threat of cashless society will cause a stampede in 2020 into precious metals. This has been a long time coming, but even now, as I say this, gold has risen to a new interim high, and silver is also getting close to $20 an ounce. And if this trend continues, a breakout in gold and silver will occur, and when people realize that there is no safe haven anymore for their money, as in bonds, treasury bills, etc., they'll be running to the only place they know to go, and that is precious metals, silver and gold. Number 9, the Techno-Populist movement in the United States will be formally recognized by writers and analysts across the country by the end of 2020. This springboards on the article that I just talked about today about Andrew Yang, the first openly techno-populist candidate for president. He's raising the discussion, and a lot of people are listening to him. I think you'll see journalists and analysts and academics writing about the techno-populist movement in America before we're done with 2020. So those are some of my forecasts for the year 2020. I hope I'm wrong on a couple of them. I hope I'm right on a couple of them. Some of them, I wish they'd just kind of go away. But this is where we live today. Most people I know of my generation for sure never, ever thought we would be living in a day such as today. And many young people, unfortunately, are completely disillusioned with the entire process now. They're buried in student debt. They can't get families started or don't want to. Many still living with their parents when they should be out on their own. Can't get jobs. Technology's passing them by. They're pretty depressed. They'll fall into the techno-populist movement. Like a bird that flies into a tree to land on a branch, it'll be the most natural thing in the world to them. I'm Patrick Wood for Technocracy News and Trends. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.